A very warm welcome to this edition of Happy Times and Places, which is a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Hadoke, ask a friend to choose a Doctor Who story. I then watch it, commentate along, and try to guess what their favourite thing about each instalment might be.
Hello Toby, it's Mark Wright here. I'm a writer. I write lots of things about Doctor Who. The story that I have picked for you is The Ambassadors of Death.
Well, it's time to go off into space. Yes, Doctor Who is going off into space. I thought he'd been exiled to Earth. I only like the stories set on Earth. I don't like this new format. It's time for episode 6 of The Ambassadors of Death. Episode 6, a time when a lot of stories have the courtesy to come to an end, but not in Season 7. Season 7 is the season of the sevens, but I'm loving all the love for The Ambassadors of Death that I've been getting as people have been watching this along with me. Apologise if you're not listening along on Patreon and you're getting this after the event, but I suppose that's just another of the advantages of coming into the patron zone. I'm sorry about that. It's the way that things are done these days, and the patrons very much help me to get these things out and make them nice. And they add an extra dimension, but not today, not tonight. Ambassador Fiends, because I'm fitting this in the middle of a very, very busy week in order to get another episode in the can whilst my other half has nipped out for probably only about an hour. So for episode 7 I will add a bit more correspondence, but for now we're leaping straight into part 6 of of The Ambassadors of Death, episode 6 of The Ambassadors of Death. The Doctor has just seen a spaceship coming towards him through the window of his capsule, and let's see how he deals with the situation. We will then check in with Mark Wright and ascertain if I'm going to actually triumph for one rare occasion. It's an anomalous kind of story, The Ambassadors of Death, so anything might happen, but Mark Wright and I are doing pretty well with our scores. We'd have done even better if I hadn't done a last-minute switcheroo last time. So let's see if I can be attuned to him this time, and if we can pick the same aspect of episode 6 of The Ambassadors of Death as our favourite. And I can only do that if I watch it, which I'm going to do, and you can too, in 3, 2, 1. I seem to recall on one of the commercial releases, the cliffhanger with the spaceship was in colour and the reprise was in black and white, or the other way around. And I always thought, but they're not refilmed. I don't know why they haven't used the colour, the better colour signal from whichever episode. But I'm sure there was a very good reason. Anyway, here we are. I still don't know where that woman's sitting. I'm not sure do you ever see her apart from in close up? She could be anywhere. She could. I mean, these days she'd be zooming in from home. Everybody works from home these days. Again, I kind of like the spaceship because you don't. Although that could be keyed in better and be slightly less wobbly. I'll accept that. But I like the fact that, because again, it's one of those things that when you watched it in black and white, you couldn't quite make it out. And then when it's in, I mean, it looks a bit Axos-y, doesn't it? It's like it's got an opening and a sort of almost organic throat, but it's it looks sort of kind of webby and sort of almost like it's made of sort of fish mouth. I don't know what that's called. The mouth of a fish. That bit looks kind of like that, but it's an attempt to do something a bit different spaceship wise, but also it's not hugely clear. And I rather like that. I remember seeing it in black and white and thinking, oh, that'll look, you'll be able to have more of a clue in colour. And you actually can't. It's still quite as the word I've used for this story throughout, quite an oblique, to discern that image. It's not quite clear what it is. And I I like that you sort of go, well, yeah, I can see what it sort of looks like, and I haven't tried to disguise it. It's just everything in the story seems a little untangible, a little unreachable, and I rather like this. This has got that slightly rainbowy sort of colour effect on it, hasn't it? And this is the episode that I'm always a bit vague on. I remember when I first watched it, when the spaceship comes at the end of the previous episode, going, do you know what? I don't actually know what happens here. But I knew that the actors playing the astronauts were also credited as their astronaut selves. But I didn't quite know how they figured within the story. And I think I remember when I first saw it, feeling slightly disappointed here because I'm going, oh, okay, now we're in the sort of weird CSO vibe, and I'm much more comfortable on the, gritty, realistic planet Earth thing that they've got going on. But actually, I think this is opening the story out, and seeing as Doctor Who has been exiled to Earth, it only occurred to me as I was sort of setting up for today, this is the first time he's left Earth in his Pertwee guise. So, bugger off, colony in space. This is the Doctor's first journey, if not to a different planet, at least to an alien environment. And that again, that sort of organic corridor that's clearly just CSO is a nice kind of different sort of background. And here, the actors who've been doing sterling work, walking around dressed as astronauts, are seen in the flesh. So that's Steve Peters, who has played a number of Ice Warriors, but his real name was Peter Darcy Stevens, and it took ages to track down what had become of him. But he died in the early 90s, mid 90s. But Rick Felgate in the middle as Van Leyden, who we've already seen. There he is. He's got a very friendly face and a very natural manner. Brent in The Seeds of Death, and an American journalist in The War Machines, and Michael Ferguson's brother-in-law. And then, sadly, the other one who we don't get ever much of a great look at, who's just stood up there and got his line with his back to the camera, got his back to the camera here, is Neville Simons, who's previously been a supernumerary in The Space Pirates, and sadly is in a select subgroup of Doctor Who actors, sadly, who met his end in a very tragic manner. He was a victim of homicide. He was one of those situations you occasionally read about. A similar thing happened to Peter Arne, who was cast as Mr. Range originally in Frontios, of an overture of a romantic kind, not received in the way that it was intended, and unfortunately there were violent consequences, and he received a blow to the head and which killed him, sadly. And I remember it hitting the news, and a friend of mine, I think it must have been in one of the tabloids, saying, "Oh, a guy who played an astronaut in Doctor Who was murdered." And I'd never quite then, I'd guessed it was probably one of these guys, and I think I'd worked it out somehow that it was Neville Simons. And then there was a question mark over it. I mentioned it in the commentary, that he'd been murdered, and then I suddenly had a doubt about it, and the internet seemed to not be as clear as I thought it would be. So, but I then did some delving and went through some records, and I was correct. But yes, what a shame. And I've been talking through the alien captain to impart that news, but yes, just the real world sometimes creeps in to Doctor Who, doesn't it? And also rather sad for him that he actually doesn't get any close-up, so we don't get a really decent look at him. A lot of it's from the back. But he's doing a lot of charging up and down these stairs and yelling, isn't he, old John Avenary? But he's great. I like the although it's, three middle-aged guys, official guys in a room arguing with each other, each one of them has a different energy. Nick Courtney, Ronald Allen, and John Abenary, and I rather enjoyed it. And this is, where we introduce the idea that Carrington himself is a form. I think it's been mentioned before, but this becomes an important plot point, that Carrington himself is a former Mars probe astronaut, which, because when you're doing conspiracy dramas, the good guys who are bad have to have a convenient, have to have a reasonable excuse for their malfeasance. Otherwise, it's just like, well, why have all these officials suddenly turned bad? And it stretches credulity a bit if suddenly everyone is, who's in a position of power becomes venal and grasping to the extent that they'd sell their country out, which is what often stretches credulity when it comes to sort of, traitors in high places. But this makes absolute sense. The conspiracy side of the plot and Carrington's motivation and the way that he, the different people that he manoeuvres behind the scenes all work for me. Now, here we have the aliens. Peter Noel Cook. We have a question mark over him. I'm sure I saw a seat in a theatre once that was dedicated to his memory, but a chap with whom I do a lot of discussion about, where the missing, where what's become of Doctor Who actors, isn't convinced that we've found out exactly where Peter Noel Cook is. And I remember seeing him in a spotlight, and he'd got quite a good agent. It was United or somebody or ICM going, because I'm sure in Doctor Who he's just a man in a monster suit who's not even saying his own lines, because Peter Halliday does the lines. So I remember that being a bit weird. And he was Canadian, I think we've managed to ascertain. But I mean, he's not saying the lines. He's just sort of gesturing rather indistinctly from behind a Venetian blind. But again, I do like the fact that even when we see the aliens, especially in this day and age where we have to see everything. I'm talking to you, the Ice Warriors. The minute they return to the series, take their mask off, and I'm like, can we not have some mystery? I like the fact that this is committed to saying, we're going to make this indistinct. You're not going to see exactly what they look like, and even when you do, we're going to, as we do, and Liz takes the mask off. We're going to do something with the camera just to make it a bit offbeat and a bit weird. So we can see that alien, but there's a video. I don't know what it looks like underneath that video effect. I'm not sure I've ever seen a picture of what it's like underneath the video effect, and the video effect makes it indistinct and radioactive. And again, really hard to say what their shape is. They're a sort of strange, shimmer. And again, beautiful. I like the fact that adds to the mystery in a series that is resolutely down to earth and full of recognizable surroundings. The fact that they've gone, well, let's try and make these aliens really difficult to get an angle on. Just in terms of their tangibility, I think is a correct move. I love the way that Ronald Allen, who's Ralph Cornish, who's sort of been a bit sharp with the Brigadier about the progress that he's made, actually concedes and goes, you've been very thorough. I like that. It speaks of a believability in the relationships between the men, and that their headbutting is not necessarily to do with sort of boring different factions, Jobsworth facing off against each other. I like that. And of course, sometimes in dramas like this, it can be very frustrating when somebody's got an important piece of information and goes, I'll tell you later. And you go, why don't they tell them now? But actually, the Doctor has a good reason here, because they're being monitored. And of course, Pertwee's Doctor is very stubborn as well. But I completely buy that. It's not one of those ones where you're shouting at the screen going, no, you need to tell them now, because if you tell them now, they'll be able to sort it out. There's an absolutely solid reason for stretching out this part of the drama, if you like, and not just for sort of annoying scripty reasons of somebody not quite getting round to the important point before they get cut off, which we see in dramas of this kind so often, and that makes you yell at the screen, and not in the way that the drama wants you to. This is brilliant. You see, there's just a scene here where she's just feeding them, and they surround her. And I love this movement of the camera, judder, judder, judder. It's beautiful, and we don't quite get a full look. I mean, it's there in full view, but it's in silhouette there. It was a very quick cut. That's Michael Ferguson being glorious. Well, I've got this. And it's not because he's not got faith in the makeup, which looks to be pretty good. It's because we don't want to see too much of it, because our imaginations will do the work. And actually, that zoom on the normally unflappable Regan and the quick flicker on William Dysart's face and Liz's very serious response, Caroline John's excellent at doing the drama well here, sells it all of going, this is horrible, this is a bit crazy. And I love that, and they don't have the aliens sort of going, we are taking our things off to say hello or anything like that. It's weird and it's a bit strange, and it's unsettling and it's gorgeous. And like all of the Ambassadors of Death, it's a little bit different and a little bit special. Oh, poor old Lennox. I love Regan's cold pragmatism. There's none of this. Because sometimes again that kind of no, don't kill them yet. But this is purely practical. Lennox is dead, needed to be dead for the plot. That all worked. That wasn't a contrivance. And so he's going, well, I need to work with this woman. All right, if she doesn't help me, I will kill her and get someone else. But it would be inconvenient to do so. So I'll go along with this right now, which helps us because it keeps the one of the leads alive. But it doesn't seem like, oh, come on, kill the one person that could threaten your plan, because she's not somebody who could threaten his plan, really. So, again, a lot of the sort of typical tropes of Doctor Who, or of indeed any drama of this kind, which I think are still done badly even in some of today's dramas, they've actually addressed them and they work them in a way that is absolutely fine. And again, this is, this is making a virtue of the processes, which I think is all perfectly reasonable. You can't just hop on a rocket. Where are you, woman? It's doing the practical processes and again building them into the drama, because the fact the Doctor has to have a bit of time in decontamination means that he can get kidnapped, which is perfectly good for everybody. Now look at this. The Faulkner family have got over the recent death of Max Faulkner number 1, and here's Max Faulkner number 2. Either that or he didn't die. There's nothing to say that electrocuting him across the barrier killed him, but if so, he's recovered very, very. What it is that he was around filming and had the costume, and this is where he was, and nobody was recording it week in, week out, and this happened to, the entrance of the ambassador happened a couple of days ago. But especially as he appears in Monster of Peladon and dies twice in episode 6, and he's actually a credited speaking part in that as well. Whereas I don't think he is here. I think he gets credit in part 4, but he doesn't get a credit here because he's he just sort of counts as a supporting artist. Well, I suppose, and he gets a credit for the previous episode because he's a supporting artist, gets stuntman, and gets promoted to a couple of lines. So the rules slightly blur. If he'd been an actor, hired for a part, he might have got himself a credit on this episode as well. But the lines blur when you're a stuntman doing walk-on kind of work. You wouldn't always be guaranteed a credit if you don't have actual proper discernible lines. But anyway, what that means is you can, if you like, play a game where the employees of special bases are actually all a Max Faulkner clone. And of course, he's in the Android Invasion, where there are various different versions of him, where indeed the opening of the whole story is him falling off a cliff and then being resurrected alive and well in a pub. So he has form for dying and coming back. He is the Lazarus Faulkner, we shall call him from here on in the happy times and places where Max Faulkner will live forever. All of these wonderful people were, and again, William Dysart scampering about like a pro, doing all of this stuff in a way that looks, fun and exciting and effortless. And yeah, so the tension here is having the Doctor having to wait, which again I think you accept because it would, we're into the realms of real fantasy if space stuff is too immediate. It's the equivalent now you'd have of somebody having a hard drive in the side of a computer, wouldn't you, and trying to download the important information onto their pen drive before the baddies come back in the room. We see that a lot. And instead here we've got a gassy kidnap, which is all fine. I mean, you wouldn't take as long doing it these days, and I think it would be perfectly fine not to take as long doing it these days. And I can't say that these scenes are the best parts of the Ambassadors of Death, but I think it earns them in a 7-part adventure. It's certainly not dull. And we do get to see John Pertwee in a very stripy dressing gown, which again was one of those, I wonder what this looks like in its proper restored colour. Oh dear, yes. Where is it? Go on, Brigadier. Off you run to go and get him. And I think Max Faulkner gets a wave, doesn't he? So yeah, that's right. They're gonna shut down all the exits, but the bread van, is it a bread van? Is it a laundrette? Which goes Silcock Bakeries, isn't it? And then Hey Ho Laundries. Yeah, there we go. So off he is. Even suits a flat cap, doesn't he? Yay. Bye-bye. And off he is. Off he goes. Just too late. And I wonder if he was directed to do that. Yeah, we need to end this sequence. It's not enough just to have you driving off. You need to do the slightly cap-lifting thing to give it a bit of punctuation to end this sequence to show that the escape has been successful. You might do it now with a shot of the van receding into the distance, but I quite like that. Yeah, get the actor to do it. That's quite fun. He's got a wonderful voice, John Abernethy. It's got a real sort of guttural edge to it, but he's very still. He's. I'm sure one of the guidebooks described him as being incapable of giving a bad performance, and I think that's fair enough. And of course, the beautiful thing of the Doctor being a member of UNIT and the Brigadier. We know that the Brigadier is right to trust him, but on the occasions where he has to justify him to his superiors, it kind of goes, yeah, he's a guy that I don't really know what his name is or where he's from. I think he might be an alien, but he's basically my responsibility, and don't look into it too hard because I haven't actually got any reasonable excuses. And that's great because it means if suddenly our own side turns upon us, we're in trouble. Even the Brigadier, if somebody above the Brigadier has a cause to cast doubt on the Doctor's motives or whatever, they have a perfectly reasonable grounds on which to do so because he is a mystery. I love this bit. I love the way that Ronald Allen delivers that line because you suddenly got a different edge to Carrington, and of course he's just invoked that it's my moral duty, it's our moral duty, which is a great line and speaks so much to the motivation of, and we see now, and as one looks at the virulence of toxicity in our public discourse, whether it be about politics or culture or anything. I quite often find myself witnessing two different friends arguing with each other passionately from different viewpoints, and both of them think they're right. Nobody thinks they're the bad guy, and I think Doctor Who is, Pertwee wouldn't have allowed that shot later. He doesn't like it up his hooter. He don't like it up him, especially nasally. And he, the idea that Carrington is absolutely driven, and I think Abernethy channels this brilliantly, that sort of righteous moral crusade that he has. Our moral duty is to do absolutely the right thing. Well, Mary Whitehouse was on a moral crusade, wasn't she? And as I say, I see people from different sides who I have sympathy with the arguments of both, but wouldn't go as far as either, believing that they are absolutely morally right and the person on the other side is therefore the complete opposite, which is absolutely morally wrong. And of course, the reality is probably somewhere in the middle. But morality, when you think you're morally right, well, of course you have to think you're morally right in order to do the things that you do, because otherwise you would question them. I love the way he does that as well. I need some things. All right, make a list, because I'll go and nick them. Or I'm actually such a secure bad guy that I have that I have friends in high places that I can get them. And I love the courtesy of him doing the chair for the doctor, and the doctor kind of going, yeah, all right, mate, I got your number 2. It's really beautifully energized, the whole thing, the dynamic between everybody. I love the ambassadors sort of hovering in the background. I love the fact that Regan hasn't left because he knows the doctor's going to try something. He's such a cool villain. I want to be him. I want to be William Dysart. Every aspect of that, I think, is absolutely gorgeous. Every little bit of performance and interaction. And Caroline John is brilliantly serious and really, has the drama so well done. And she's not frightened. She's not carrying. She's not desperate. She's not asking stupid questions. She's Yay, well done, Doctor Who. And here's General Carrington. Oh, look at that light going through the door as well. Ah, yes, see? Because he is also a baddie. I love this episode ending. And I learned to do that to myself. I'm sorry, Doctor. It's my moral duty. Beautiful. And a close-up of a gun. Straight down the barrel. What a fantastic episode ending. And I love the sort of regret that Abineri exhibits. I'm going to have to do this, but, it's because it's the right thing to do. General Carrington, John Abineri. What a bloody hero he is. I love all 3 of those. Ronald Allen, John Abineri, William Dysart. Oh, tip of the hat, too, to Peter Halliday, who's doing fine work as the Eddie voice. Remind me to talk to you about Carl Conway as well, who has been American correspondent in another Michael Ferguson story, The War Machines, but who has a claim to fame that I will that also involves a naked Thal that I will discuss with you next time. Because I can't hang around with this one. Not all episodes of Happy Times and Places are guaranteed to be hugely long, but there's so much in that, isn't there? I love that. As I said, there's a little bit of hanging about when Regan's going into the complex and charging about, which we've seen him do in previous episodes. And the Doctor hanging around. I mean, they do justify it with the fact that they're trying to be realistic about the space travel, and that there are things like decontamination and journeys take a while and all of that. But you would tighten that up now. But I think there are Doctor Who stories of 6 episodes and even 4 that have sequences that are as unuseful to the plot, that take longer and aren't as well realised. So I'll go with it, whilst acknowledging that, I know there are some people who find some of these stories quite long, but I have to say, I don't think there's anything that you could take some of this out and have a really good story, but I think you have a really good story even with that stuff in. I'm not I'm not advocating that a re-edit in order to make it better. It would make it different. It would perhaps make it choppier. But I actually think the timing of it and the pacing of it and the realization of it, because a lot of that extra stuff is film sequences, and then they very cleverly have those played alongside a very cheap sequence of the Doctor either sitting in a spaceship or standing in a decontamination room that looks like a tiny 3-walled set that either he's in or he's getting carried out of by Regan, or the Brigadier's walking in, and that's all you need, speaking into a microphone on the side, and that's good economics. But we have already in this episode, let's bear in mind, having had 5 episode set on Earth, but with, talk into, the unknowable space, which we've largely seen from Earth's point of view. I know we were occasionally in the capsule with Van Leyden, but we were largely from our point of view on Earth. We've actually accompanied the Doctor into space, but they still make use of the fact that, you had the radar screen when the spaceship came and sort of swallowed up the Mars probe, and the Doctor sort of vanished. Having people down on Earth watching just lights on a radar, and one of them goes out, or one of them is consumed by another, or even one of them approaching another. That's great dramatic stuff as well, because it's like being behind a glass and unable to do anything. And I love all of that, and I think all of that is done very well. But then, the story is bold and goes for another dynamic, and we arrive on the alien spaceship where everything looks a bit strange. And I think that CSO sequence would definitely worry about showing that to a modern viewer, but I've discussed before why that sort of stuff we should put out of our minds, really. But they did the thing of him stepping out and sort of floating down, which is quite a nifty effect, and again, it was done very economically. They only really had one camera angle to play with, and he goes into that corridor, that fish gullet fishnet corridor that he's walking down. And then you've got that weird thing of them. It goes slightly strange and surreal, where they're watching a football match that isn't actually a football match. And again, you can't quite get what's going on in that room because the lighting is a bit weird. The set is slightly different from every other set that we've had in the adventure, and the colours of it and the lighting aren't quite clear. And again, watching that in black and white, I thought, I wonder what, or with the the compromised colour, I wonder what that really sort of looks like. And even now, it's again slightly, and it is compromised by the fact that it's been restored. So even though we're closer now to what it was originally, it's still slightly just out of reach from us, which again ties in with that slightly unknowable quality that the story has. It's almost like its fate has helped with it, unless of course you're somebody who doesn't like stuff that you can't quite fixate on, and maybe that's why some people don't quite get on with Ambassadors of Death, because they don't feel that they've quite locked into it, because it is it is slightly unreachable and unknowable and not quite perfect in terms of all the technical side of it, and it doesn't look like it would have done back in the day. Although, of course, back in the day, loads of people would have watched it in black and white, so they'd have been trying to work out exactly what it was supposed to look like as well. And I think that would have been a very different experience from in the Silurians or Inferno or Spearhead from Space, where there's nothing quite so sort of intangible and strange. So for a season where everything is similar sort of surroundings, I think Ferguson, who is so good at the earthy and action-packed and realistic stuff, has also put some thought into making it offbeat and science fiction and weird and strange. And with that in mind, I think it's the strange that, as much as I still love all of these characters, it's the strange, and I think the fact that we go into space is a really good call. It's the strange that I'm going to go for, namely the appearance of the aliens, the fact that they hold back on that even then when we get that close-up, that we've got that weird juddering camera effect and the quick cutting that is a Ferguson trademark, the fact that the alien captain is behind a Venetian blind and sort of scratched by a video effect, the desire for the show to remain slightly out of reach and slightly away from us, and to keep the powder dry and to keep it slightly strange. And the fact that, as I say, I don't know if that photo of the ambassador that I saw in the Radio Times 20th anniversary, especially, it wasn't a screen grab, was it? Because we didn't really do those then, and yet it's not a picture. It's not a picture of what it actually looked like. So again, I'm still not quite sure, and I know quite a lot about Doctor Who. Do you know what I mean? I still can't quite ascertain what's real and what isn't about the realization of the ambassadors, and I rather like that. I've done a whole podcast about how some of the things we don't know, or that we know, can be as exciting and intriguing as knowing everything. And sometimes I think you can know too much, and if you dismantle everything down to its base components, well, you might know how it all works, but you take away its poetry as you do so. So the realization of the aliens, but also that ties in with the strangeness, the unreachable, the slightly more offbeat qualities that Ambassadors of Death has that we don't really talk about so much when we look at season 7, that we think about as being very earthbound and gritty and a bit more realistic and less fantastical than Doctor Who often is. What's Mark say? Come on, Mark.
Episode 6, and for this particular episode, I'm going to go for the moment between the Doctor and Liz, that moment where the Doctor is brought to where the ambassadors are being held, and the Doctor wakes up and sees Liz, and that moment where he just reaches up and just caresses her face is so tender and so touching. And it's kind of sad. I think there's a consensus that the chemistry between the Doctor and Liz is not up there with the best Doctor companion pairings, but here they are just. I mean, I think they're brilliant in all of season 7 together. John Pertwee and Caroline John are superb together, but here there's a real tenderness to their relationship, which isn't seen on screen very often. And it's maybe a throw forward to the relationship that the Doctor eventually has with Joe, but here it's a real moment between people who are very close. They say that John Pertwee's Doctor was grumpy. In season 7, he's very grumpy. But that is just this moment of softness, this tenderness that points to a very complex relationship between the two of them. I think it's, there's a lot more going on under the surface than that kind of the writing and consensus might say about the Doctor and Liz. As we know, Carrie, moved on from Doctor Who fairly quickly. It was, a changing series again, but I think her contribution is always superb. So that moment between the Doctor and Liz is definitely my standout moment for episode 6.
Yeah, and I was talking about the Doctor's nose. Oh, well, I don't care. I love the Ambassadors of Death, and I think Mark and I are pretty much on the same wavelengths. But and also that is a lovely moment. But and I think the Doctor and Liz are great, and they do have a fantastic dynamic. I think it's a slightly more sort of respectful one, but yeah, he's capable of moments of great tenderness, Pertwee, and we must remember that when we're so struck by the fact that he's sometimes a total arse, but in a lovable way. I don't know how, I don't know why. It's because there's something, I don't know, there's something reassuringly paternal about him, and I know that paternalism can be a problem when our heroes are a bit patronising to everybody around them, particularly female characters. But I suppose speaking from a personal level, I sort of craved a bit of paternalism in my growing up. So maybe that's why I forgive him a little bit, and I don't mind an aloofness and an occasional crassness in my heroic male leading figure, because they bring so many other things that were perhaps absent from my life. So maybe I give that stuff an easier ride than other people do, who've got every right and every inclination not to, and absolutely fair enough. I totally understand that. But it's fine. I love him. I think he's great. And I'm actually liking him more now. As I say, I think I've said earlier, I loved him when I was a kid. He was up there, and then when I collected the videos, he sort of went down, in my opinion, a bit. And in recent years, he's rocketed right back up there. I love Pertwee, that said, I've always loved season 7. It's always been my top Pertwee. I wondered if actually, having loved some of the later, more comfortable Pertwees, and with some of the Hartnells that weren't necessarily my bag, that since revisiting either for this or for the season 2 box set, I've been charmed by stories, because I've suddenly found that charm is a thing I really look for in Doctor Who that I maybe didn't want when I wanted Doctor Who to be hard and amazing and something I could show my schoolmates, whatever. I love the charm. So I wondered if maybe that season 7 would then be reflected badly in my newfound desire for something charming and less gritty and perhaps more sort of comforting and joyful that the later Pertwee seasons are. But no, season 7's still magic. Those later seasons are still great, and as I say, I probably like them more now than I have in the past. But season 7's still magnificent, and I'm happy to report the Ambassadors of Death is still magnificent, and I'm really thrilled I don't know if you can hear that, but Bernard is offering, because we are a balanced podcast, Bernard, my dog, is snoring. He's been sent off to sleep by the doctor's trip to decontamination. But no, I'm happy to report that season 7 is terrific, and I'm really enjoying watching this along with people with whom I'm corresponding who are saying, I'm having a great time watching The Ambassadors of Death. I certainly am too. So thanks to Mark Wright for his advocacy and enthusiasm. Thanks to everybody who was listening when I was recording this, and thanks to you in the future who's listening to it after the fact, but whose ears are no less welcome and gratefully received. And even though I'm a voice from the past, my opinion will not change on this. I am on a mission to spread all the positivity I can about a neglected gem of Doctor Who, The Ambassadors of Death. I have to do it. I've got no choice. It is, after all, my moral duty. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Mark Wright, who you can find on Instagram at mrwright2317. Writer, editor, making a living doing something I love, says his byline. Love that. Please give him a follow, and also target any gratitude you might have to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Robin Bland, Gareth Bowley, David Brody, Hugh Buchtman, Tim Burrows, DC, Jim Cameron, Paul Cannington, Anthony Carroll, Damien Cartin, Phil Chapman, Ralph Chilton, Susan Christian, Steve Churchill, Kevin Clark, Graham Cluley, Mark Cockram, Charles Coppin, Simon Coling, Ben Cook, Martin Cook, Matt Corner, Leslie Coots, Ben Cowdell, Philip Craggs, Oliver Crocker, Sarah Crotzer, David Crew, Steve Cunniff, Dave Curran and Simon Curtis. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like to be at an ambassador's reception with the patrons whose names I just read out there, it's one of the perks, patreon.com/Toby Hadoke is the place to go, and the butler will have a tray of goodies, which includes not only having your name read out on the credits, but also advance releases, bonus material, exclusives like monthly AMAs and pictures of my dog, but also behind-the-scenes looks at some of the DVD and Blu-ray extras that I make, and exclusive interviews with people that I've picked up along the way. It could be a guard from Inferno, it could be a victim from the Seeds of Death, and it could be somebody from behind the scenes who's never spoken on record before. Depends what I've got kicking about and how desperate a slot I have to fill, because you usually get something on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays. Pictures of my dog are a bonus on a Tuesday. And that's all available at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. And for as little as £3 a month, you get all of that stuff, and you get a 10% discount, even on the £3, but on any of the tiers. And there's nothing, particularly specific as you go up the tiers. There are little trinkets to lure you up, but all of the content, all of the releases, all that stuff I just mentioned is all there at the lowest tier, which is £3 a month. But every tier gets a 10% discount if you sign up for a year in one go. There are no sort of special enticements to ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke. That's just a way of occasionally throwing something into my proffered cyber hat, cyberspace hat. If I say cyber hat, you'll be imagining something with jug ears and some sort of emotional inhibitor. I mean a hat on cyber. I'm basically busking. That's what I'm doing at Ko-fi. It's a way of buying me a pretend coffee if you occasionally like the sound of what I'm throwing out there. That's me standing there at Covent Garden Underground Station offering my opinions on, the Web of Fear and whatever else you might want. That'd be great, isn't it? Something we're used to people sort of busking and going, "The answer, my friend." Well, I could be a station down going, "And did you know that in episode 1 of The Web of Fear, the actor playing Julius Silverstein, Frederick Schrecker, blah de blah, and the character was actually called Emile Julius in the Target novel, presumably because Terrance Dicks took one look what had been done and went, I think this might be a Jewish stereotype too far. But that's my guess. Or it went the other way around. The character was called Emil Julius. I can't remember what it is in the script. Anyway, let's not get into that. This is not a Web of Fear podcast. But you see, but by the time somebody sang a Dylan song, I could have tied myself in knots about established facts or not of Doctor Who, through with a bit of speculation and some unsubstantiated segues thrown in. But that was a very long way round, wasn't it? I think I took the Jubilee line. I don't know which is the longest line, but imagine I'd inserted the longest line there. That would have been brilliant to get to that plug. But anyway, yeah, that's the Ko-fi thing. But what costs you nothing? Costs you nothing. Not like Patreon or bloody Ko-fi. I expect your money is to go to anywhere online where these podcasts are available. And they're available on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Is that a thing? I don't really know how it works. But anyway, it's all out there. If there's a place where you can write nice things that people can read, I'd love it if you could do that. That costs you nothing but a little bit of your time. And if you could give these a 5-star review. As I'm recording this, I've slightly stalled on Apple. It's all very nice, but I haven't had any new ones for a while. So if you can spare me a 5 stars and a couple of paragraphs saying what you like about these, it just helps to polish the old algorithms. But spread the word in cyberspace. Tell your friends. That costs you nothing, and I'd be most grateful. Of course, the other way to spread a word about anything is to do so on the internet. And there are all sorts of ways we talk to each other now. I'm on Twitter at Toby Hadoke. These podcasts have their own feed at Hadoke Podcasts. I also have a Facebook page. I'm also on Instagram at Toby.Hadoke. And I've been practicing doing videos there and the stuff for my comedy club, because I am really a comedian. I just do this for fun. And it's my gift to you. And also I have nothing whatsoever on TikTok. But if you wanted to do a TikTok song about these podcasts, then please do. Go on, listeners. Go on TikTok. I like Happy Tons of Places. It's the best Doctor Who podcast there is. You can lie. It's fine. He sometimes does stories with Earths, and he sometimes does stories with spaces. Whatever you like. But not that. But anyway, hit the social media, say nice things about these, and then I promise never to do what I've just done there, then, whatever the hell that was, ever again. This is a relatively short episode, although I'm sure when I started doing this, episodes were supposed to be about half an hour. So now that when I think an episode is short because it comes in under an hour, I think you're doing all right. And actually, sometimes probably less is more. Most of the time, Toby, less is more. Thanks very much. But I did notice that because this is going to be the shortest episode, and also I cut Mark's intro down a little bit because I noticed, well, with 7 episodes, I always do the full intro for episode 1, and then for the subsequent episodes, I cut it down a bit. And I sometimes put the full intro back on the last episode just to sort of bookend it, which can sometimes be nice. But I just noticed that Mark's, had his truncated but still quite long intro for the past few episodes, and I thought, oh, maybe there's a place I can cut it. So actually, he's had his shortest intro here, and the episode that's turned out to be the shortest, where actually a longer intro might have helped with the running time. But hey, it means that I'm continuing my season 7 anomalous opening titles intros kind of vibe. So it's all part of a plan. But anyway, I've got to keep this short because I think the other half is coming back. Oh, it's raining, so I can't walk the dog yet. Or has it stopped? No, there's rain above, but not to the sides. Maybe it has rained, and it's just not cleaned off the skylight. Anyway, listen up. Bernard's going to need feeding, and Sheridan is going to be back from her appointment. But I've managed to squeeze in a trip to space, onto an alien spaceship, back again, into decontamination, and then to a secret base, all in the space of, 48 minutes. So, and Doctor Who took even less time than that, and he managed to do so in a nutty dressing gown as well. So all good. All is good here. I hope all is good with you. And I'm making this sound like it's the end of the episode, where it's actually the coda. So I could really, I'm entitled to just sort of fade out on a vaguely conversational note. But I could end it and say, see you next time. I won't see you because it's not a visual medium. But then again, when they're on the telly, they don't see you either. You see them, but they don't see you. So why do you say see you next time? Because you're not actually going to. Now, you do when you're live, because you can see the audience. This is already too much, isn't it? So do I go for the conversational end or the definitive end? What do you think? Oh, I could go for the questioning end. The way to end this, it's a universe of infinite varieties, isn't it? I suppose it would be appropriate if actually we ended this one with somebody coming up, pointing a gun at me, and you're getting a big old close up of that. And I think because of the way that my mouth is now running away with me, that would be entirely appropriate and probably more than fair if they pulled the bloody trigger.